Before we begin, please subscribe to support our sleep channel as evening settles in and the quiet of the day slowly gives way to the calm of the night. It is comforting to think about the countless moments our minds have carried with us. The first day of school. The smell of fresh bread drifting through a kitchen. The face of an old friend. The sound of rain against a bedroom window. Some memories seem to remain with us effortlessly. Others slowly fade until only fragments remain. Yet, whether they are bright and vivid or soft around the edges, they all help shape the story we tell ourselves about who we are. Memory is one of the greatest gifts of the human mind. It allows us to recognize familiar places, learn new skills, avoid old dangers, and pass knowledge from one generation to the next. Without memory, every morning would feel like waking into an entirely unfamiliar world. For thousands of years, philosophers wondered how memory worked. The ancient Greeks imagined memory as impressions pressed into wax, like the seal of a ring leaving its mark behind. Later, thinkers compared memory to books stored inside an enormous library, each experience carefully placed onto its proper shelf, waiting patiently until it was needed again. For centuries, these ideas remained philosophical. Then, during the late 19th century, psychology began emerging as a science. Researchers started asking not simply what memory was, but how it could be measured. Tonight, we will follow that journey from the first careful experiments to modern discoveries that reshaped our understanding of the human mind. Long before brain scanners and computers filled research laboratories, memory remained one of humanity's greatest mysteries. Everyone experienced it, yet no one knew precisely how it worked. In the 1880s, the German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus decided to study memory scientifically. To remove the influence of emotion and prior knowledge, he invented thousands of meaningless syllables, simple combinations such as dax, lef, and yait. Remarkably, he served as his own experimental participant, memorizing list after list and recording how quickly they faded from memory. Years of painstaking work revealed that forgetting followed a predictable pattern. Information disappeared rapidly, at first before the rate of forgetting gradually slowed. Today, this remains known as the forgetting curve. Although modern science has refined the details, Ebbinghaus demonstrated for the first time that memory could be measured rather than merely discussed. His findings also revealed something comforting. Forgetting is not simply failure. If every conversation, every face, and every passing moment remained permanently vivid, daily life would become overwhelming. Forgetting allows the brain to focus on what matters most. Several decades later, British psychologist Frederick Bartlett asked a different question. Rather than memorizing meaningless syllables, what happens when people remember meaningful stories? In 1932, Bartlett published his influential book, Remembering. One of his best-known experiments asked participants to read an indigenous Canadian folktale called War of the Ghosts. The story contained unfamiliar customs and supernatural elements. Participants recalled it immediately, then again after increasing periods of time. Something remarkable happened. The story gradually changed. Unfamiliar details disappeared. Strange events became more ordinary. Characters behaved in ways that better matched the participants' own expectations and culture. Bartlett concluded that memory is reconstructive. Each act of remembering rebuilds an experience rather than replaying it exactly as it happened. Memories are assembled from fragments, knowledge, expectations, and meaning. Modern psychology has repeatedly supported this broad conclusion. Memory is remarkably dependable for everyday life, but it is not a perfect recording. It is an adaptive system designed to help us understand the world rather than preserve every detail forever. That realization raised an extraordinary scientific question. If memories are reconstructed each time we recall them, could entirely new details, or even entirely new memories, sometimes emerge? Over the following decades, psychologists set out to answer that question through increasingly creative experiments. Their discoveries would eventually transform medicine, education, neuroscience, and even the justice system. The year was 1974. And although psychologists had already begun accepting that memory was reconstructive, an important question remained unanswered. Could memories continue changing after an event had already ended? A young cognitive psychologist named Elizabeth Loftus believed they could. Rather than relying on philosophical arguments, she designed an experiment simple enough that almost anyone could understand, yet powerful enough to transform psychology. Volunteers were invited into a laboratory and shown short films of real traffic accidents. The collisions were not especially dramatic. They resembled the kinds of accidents that might appear in a driver's education course. Participants simply watched the films and paid attention to what they saw. Afterward came what seemed like an ordinary questionnaire. One group was asked about how fast were the cars going when they hit each other. Another group received an almost identical question. Only one word changed. They were asked about how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. At first glance, the difference seemed almost trivial. Hit, smashed. Both described a collision, yet Loftus suspected language itself might quietly influence memory. When the results were analyzed, participants who heard the word smashed consistently estimated higher speeds than those who heard hit. A single word had changed how the same event was remembered. The story did not end there. 1 week later, many of the same volunteers returned. This time, they were asked a new question. Did you see any broken glass? There had been no broken glass anywhere in the original films. Even so, participants who had earlier heard the word smashed were significantly more likely to remember seeing shattered glass that never existed. This finding became one of the most influential demonstrations of what psychologists now call the misinformation effect. Information learned after an event can sometimes become woven into the memory itself. The study did not suggest that every memory is easily changed, nor did it claim that witnesses are generally unreliable. Instead, it demonstrated something more subtle. Human memory remains open to influence even after an experience has ended. The implications reached far beyond university laboratories. Police investigators began reconsidering how they interviewed witnesses. Lawyers and judges became more cautious when evaluating confident testimony. Researchers across the world designed new experiments to test, challenge, and expand Loftus's findings. Some studies confirmed the original work under different conditions. Others explored its limits. scientists discovered that memory can be surprisingly resilient in many situations while remaining vulnerable in others. Factors such as stress, delay, repeated questioning, and exposure to new information all influence the likelihood that recollections may change. During the following decades, Loftus continued investigating increasingly challenging questions. Could people come to remember events that never occurred? Could suggestion influence childhood memories? These questions would eventually lead to some of the most discussed experiments in modern psychology. Meanwhile, other researchers broadened the field. Endel Tulving carefully distinguished episodic memory from semantic memory, showing that remembering personal experiences differs from remembering facts. Daniel Schachter described the 7 sins of memory, explaining that many everyday memory errors arise from normal mental processes rather than defects. Ulrich Neisser encouraged psychologists to study memory as it appears in ordinary life, instead of only inside laboratories. Together, these scientists transformed memory research from a small academic specialty into one of psychology's most active fields. As evening grows quieter, one lesson begins to stand above the rest. Memory is influenced not only by what we experience, but also by the questions we are asked afterward. Sometimes, even the gentlest wording can subtly shape the story our minds later reconstruct. In the next chapter, we'll explore a series of remarkable experiments that push this idea even further, including volunteers who came to remember childhood events that never happened, and a simple word list experiment that continues to surprise psychology students around the world. As psychologists absorbed Elizabeth Loftus's findings, a deeper question naturally emerged. If a single word could influence how an event was remembered, could an entirely new memory ever be created? It sounded extraordinary. Most researchers believed there had to be limits. Carefully designed experiments would soon begin exploring exactly where those limits might lie. During the early 1990s, psychologist Elizabeth Loftus and researcher Jacqueline Pickrell designed what would become one of the best-known studies in cognitive psychology. Today, it is remembered simply as the Lost in the Mall experiment. Family members first supplied several genuine childhood memories belonging to each participant. Hidden among these real events was one fictional story. It described the participant becoming lost in a shopping mall as a young child before eventually being reunited with family. The event had never happened. Participants were asked to read each story and describe everything they could remember. Unsurprisingly, they recalled details from the genuine memories. Yet, over a series of interviews, something unexpected occurred. Some participants gradually began adding details to the fictional shopping mall story. They described stores, emotions, conversations, and even the feeling of being frightened. They were not pretending. Many sincerely believed fragments of the suggested event had occurred. The study was carefully interpreted. It did not demonstrate that any memory could be implanted, nor did it suggest that deeply significant autobiographical memories could be manufactured at will. Instead, it showed that under carefully controlled circumstances, some people could come to accept and elaborate upon a suggested childhood experience. The experiment also sparked vigorous scientific debate. Some researchers questioned how closely laboratory suggestions resemble memories that develop naturally throughout life. Others emphasized that the findings highlighted the importance of avoiding suggestive interviewing techniques, particularly when discussing childhood events. A different group of researchers approached false memory from another direction. In the mid-1990s, Henry Roediger III and Kathleen McDermott revived and expanded an earlier paradigm that has since become a classroom demonstration around the world. Imagine quietly listening to a list of words: bed, pillow, dream, blanket, night, tired, yawn, rest. After hearing dozens of related words, many people confidently report hearing one additional word: sleep. Yet the word sleep was never spoken. This demonstration, known as the DRM, false memory paradigm, revealed that the brain often remembers meaning rather than exact wording. Instead of storing every detail independently, memory organizes related ideas into broader concepts. Most of the time, this makes learning remarkably efficient. Occasionally, it also produces convincing memory errors. Researchers then turned their attention to source monitoring. Volunteers viewed pictures, imagined objects, or listened to descriptions before later identifying where each memory came from. Most decisions were correct. Occasionally, however, participants confused something they imagined with something they had actually seen. These small mistakes provided another clue that remembering depends not only on what is stored, but also on correctly identifying its source. Taken together, these studies painted a balanced picture. Memory is not hopelessly unreliable. If it were, daily life would be impossible. Instead, memory is generally dependable, precisely because it emphasizes meaning, patterns, and understanding. Those same strengths, however, occasionally create opportunities for reconstruction and error. By the close of the 20th century, psychologists had accumulated decades of evidence showing that memory was far more dynamic than once believed. Yet, one profound mystery remained: what physical processes inside the brain allowed these remarkable reconstructions to occur? Answering that question required scientists to look beyond behavior and into the living brain itself. By the beginning of the 21st century, psychologists had gathered compelling evidence that memory could change over time. Yet an important mystery remained. What was actually happening inside the brain? Researchers knew memories could be altered, but they still needed to understand the biological machinery that made such changes possible. One of the greatest breakthroughs came not from a new technology, but from a single patient known simply as HM. In 1953, surgeons removed portions of both of his medial temporal lobes, including much of the hippocampus, in an effort to treat severe epilepsy. The operation reduced his seizures, but it produced an unexpected consequence. HM could remember much of his childhood, yet he was largely unable to form lasting new episodic memories. Each day felt strangely disconnected from the one before. For decades, scientists carefully studied HM. His experience revealed that the hippocampus is essential for creating new memories, even though older memories can remain largely intact. This single case transformed neuroscience and helped establish the hippocampus as one of the brain's most important memory structures. The hippocampus does not function alone. Nearby lies the amygdala, a region deeply involved in processing emotion. Experiences associated with fear, excitement, joy, or sadness often feel unusually vivid because emotional significance influences how strongly memories are encoded. Even so, vivid memories are not automatically accurate. Research has repeatedly shown that emotionally powerful memories can still contain distortions. Another key region is the prefrontal cortex. This area helps organize information, evaluate evidence, and determine whether a remembered event seems plausible. Whenever we recall a memory, the prefrontal cortex works alongside many other regions, quietly assembling fragments into a coherent experience. Most of the time, this reconstruction is remarkably successful. Occasionally, however, assumptions or expectations fill small gaps without our awareness. Scientists now describe memory as a continuous process rather than a single event. Experiences are first encoded, then gradually consolidated into longer-term storage. Retrieval allows us to remember them later. Importantly, retrieval is not merely replay. Modern research suggests that recalling a memory briefly returns it to an active, flexible state before it is stored again. This process is known as reconsolidation. Reconsolidation has become one of the most exciting discoveries in modern memory research. Each time a memory is recalled, it has an opportunity to be updated with new information. Usually, these changes are small and helpful. They allow memories to remain useful as circumstances change. In rare situations, however, inaccurate details may also become integrated into the recollection. Sleep plays a surprisingly active role in this process. During restful sleep, especially deeper stages of sleep, the brain continues strengthening important neural connections while reducing others. Rather than shutting down, memory systems quietly organize the day's experiences. This is one reason students often remember information better after a good night's sleep than after staying awake through the night. Stress adds another layer of complexity. Moderate emotional arousal may strengthen memory formation by encouraging the brain to pay attention. Extremely high stress, however, can narrow attention and reduce the accurate encoding of surrounding details. Later, when recalling the event, the brain naturally reconstructs what is missing using context and prior knowledge. Advances in functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, allowed researchers to observe changing patterns of brain activity while volunteers learned and recalled information. Electroencephalography, known as EEG, provided another perspective. By measuring the brain's electrical activity with extraordinary precision in time, neither technique can read memories directly, but together they have revealed that genuine and false memories often activate many of the same brain networks. This overlap helps explain why false memories can feel every bit as real as authentic ones. Researchers have also investigated pattern completion, a process through which the brain reconstructs an entire experience from only a few available details. Seeing a familiar doorway or hearing a familiar melody may trigger a complete memory. Usually, this remarkable efficiency serves us well. Occasionally, it also encourages the brain to add details that logically fit the pattern, even if they were never part of the original event. Taken together, these discoveries reveal an extraordinary balance. Human memory is neither fragile nor infallible. It is adaptive. Its flexibility allows us to learn, solve problems, and make sense of new experiences throughout life. The same flexibility, under particular circumstances, also explains why memory can occasionally change in subtle and surprising ways. As the evening grows quieter, the brain appears even more remarkable than before. Billions of neurons work together without our awareness, preserving the moments that shape our lives while constantly adapting them to an ever-changing world. In the next chapter, we will step beyond the laboratory to see how these discoveries have transformed courtrooms, classrooms, hospitals, and everyday conversations. As researchers uncovered the remarkable flexibility of memory, their discoveries slowly began leaving the laboratory. What had once seemed like an abstract question about psychology soon influenced courtrooms, hospitals, classrooms, and even ordinary family conversations. The science of memory was becoming part of everyday life. For much of the 20th century, eyewitness testimony was often considered among the strongest forms of evidence available in court. A confident witness who pointed to a suspect could have tremendous influence over a jury. Yet the work of Elizabeth Loftus and many others encouraged legal systems to ask a difficult question. Could an honest witness sincerely remember details that were not entirely accurate? Decades of research showed that memory is influenced by many factors. Time naturally allows details to fade. Conversations with other witnesses may unintentionally introduce new information. News reports can shape recollections. Even the wording of an investigator's questions may influence what a witness later remembers. None of this means eyewitnesses are dishonest. It means they are human. These findings inspired important changes in investigative practice. During the 1980s, psychologists Ronald Fisher and R. Edward Geiselman developed what became known as the cognitive interview. Rather than relying on leading questions, investigators encourage witnesses to describe events freely, recall the surrounding environment, and revisit the experience from different perspectives. The goal is to recover as much accurate information as possible while minimizing unintended suggestion. False memory research also influenced conversations within psychotherapy. During the 1980s and 1990s, considerable debate surrounded so-called recovered memories, particularly those involving childhood experiences. Some clinicians believed traumatic memories could sometimes be inaccessible for long periods before returning. Others warned that highly suggestive therapeutic techniques might unintentionally contribute to inaccurate recollections. The discussion became one of the most debated topics in modern psychology. Today, most mental health professionals approach memory with careful balance. They recognize that memories deserve thoughtful consideration without assuming every recollection is automatically complete, incomplete, true, or false. Clinical practice increasingly emphasizes careful interviewing, corroborating evidence when available, and avoiding unnecessary suggestion. Children occupy a special place in this research. Young children possess remarkable imaginations and are eager to communicate with trusted adults. At the same time, studies have shown they can be more susceptible to repeated suggestion than older individuals. As a result, professionals who interview children receive specialized training designed to ask open, neutral questions that reduce the risk of influencing recollections. The influence of memory extends well beyond courts and clinics. Families often tell the same stories for decades. A holiday gathering, a memorable vacation, or an amusing childhood mishap may be retold countless times. Gradually, small details sometimes shift. Different family members may remember different versions of the same afternoon. Usually, these differences are harmless examples of reconstructive memory rather than evidence that anyone is deliberately changing the past. In the digital age, Researchers have also begun studying how online information shapes remembering. Headlines repeated across social media, familiar photographs, and frequently shared claims may all create a powerful sense of familiarity. Psychologists continue investigating how repetition influences confidence and how easily familiar information can become woven into later recollections. Advertising has quietly relied upon related principles for generations. Familiar brands often become easier to remember simply because they are encountered repeatedly. This phenomenon, sometimes called the mere exposure effect, illustrates how familiarity can influence preference without requiring detailed conscious recollection. Ethical advertising seeks to inform consumers while recognizing the natural relationship between repetition and memory. Healthcare provides another practical example. Physicians frequently ask patients to describe symptoms that began weeks, months, or even years earlier. Because memory naturally changes with time, doctors often combine personal recollections with laboratory tests, medical records, imaging, and observations from family members to build the clearest possible understanding of a patient's health. Throughout all of these examples, one theme quietly returns. Memory is neither an enemy nor an unquestionable authority. It is one source of information among many. Appreciating both its remarkable strengths and its occasional limitations allows investigators, teachers, physicians, therapists, and families to make wiser decisions without losing confidence in the extraordinary abilities of the human mind. As another peaceful evening continues, perhaps the most valuable lesson is one of humility. Every remembered conversation, every familiar photograph, every treasured childhood story has traveled a long journey through the brain before returning to our awareness. Most arrive safely. A few gather small changes along the way. In our final chapter, we will explore what scientists still hope to discover, the misconceptions that remain, and why the study of memory continues to captivate researchers around the world. By now, our quiet journey has carried us from the earliest experiments of Hermann Ebbinghaus to modern brain imaging laboratories. Along the way, one idea has remained remarkably consistent. Memory is not a perfect recording, yet neither is it hopelessly unreliable. It is an adaptive system, constantly balancing stability with change. Even today, scientists continue asking new questions about where the limits of memory truly lie. One of the best-known modern examples is something popularly called the Mandela effect. The name arose after many people confidently remembered Nelson Mandela dying in prison during the 1980s, despite his release in 1990 and his death in 2013. Similar examples include famous movie quotations, product logos, and children's books that large groups of people remember differently from the historical record. Psychologists generally interpret these experiences as examples of shared memory errors rather than evidence of alternate timelines or parallel universes. They remind us that many people can arrive at similar mistakes because human memory often relies on the same shortcuts and expectations. Another fascinating area involves what psychologists call flashbulb memories. After emotionally significant public events, many people feel certain they can remember exactly where they were and what they were doing when they first heard the news. Researchers have followed participants for months and even years after major historical events, repeatedly asking them to describe those moments. Although confidence usually remains very high, the details often change gradually over time. Once again, vividness does not always guarantee perfect accuracy. Scientists are also exploring how new technologies may improve our understanding of remembering. Virtual reality allows researchers to create highly controlled environments that feel surprisingly realistic. Instead of relying only on photographs or word lists, volunteers can walk through digital spaces while researchers carefully measure what is later remembered, forgotten, or reconstructed. Artificial intelligence is contributing in a different way. Rather than replacing psychologists, AI helps analyze enormous collections of research data, identify subtle patterns, and generate new hypotheses. It cannot determine whether a particular memory is true or false, but it can help scientists recognize trends that would otherwise remain hidden among thousands of observations. Another promising field involves memory reconsolidation. Researchers continue investigating whether recalling a memory briefly returns it to a flexible state before it is stored again. Understanding this process could someday improve treatments for conditions involving distressing memories. Scientists remain appropriately cautious, however, recognizing that much remains to be learned before laboratory discoveries become routine clinical practice. Despite remarkable progress, important mysteries remain. Why do some individuals appear more susceptible to suggestion than others? How do personality, emotion, sleep, and aging interact with memory reconstruction? Can researchers reliably distinguish true memories from false ones using brain activity alone? At present, no single test can answer these questions with complete certainty, and scientists continue searching for better methods. Perhaps the greatest contribution of false memory research has been its influence beyond psychology. Courtrooms now evaluate eyewitness testimony more carefully. Investigators use improved interviewing techniques. Teachers understand the value of retrieval practice. Healthcare professionals appreciate the importance of combining memory with additional evidence. Across many professions, a deeper understanding of memory has encouraged greater humility and better decision making. As the evening grows quieter, there is something reassuring about this conclusion. The human mind is not a machine designed to record every detail forever. Instead, it is a living system built for learning, adapting, and finding meaning. Its occasional imperfections are closely connected to the variabilities that allow us to imagine, create, solve problems, and understand one another. Can we create false memories? The scientific evidence suggests that, under carefully studied circumstances, some false memories can indeed develop. Yet, the same body of research also shows that memory serves us extraordinarily well throughout everyday life. It is dependable far more often than it is mistaken. Understanding its strengths and limitations does not weaken our confidence in memory. Instead, it deepens our appreciation for one of the brain's greatest achievements. Outside, the world has grown a little quieter. Perhaps the day's distractions have begun to fade, leaving only a few gentle thoughts behind. Every experience you have ever lived, every familiar face, every lesson learned, every place that has felt like home, exists because billions of neurons have worked together in quiet harmony. They have shaped your memories just as your memories have quietly shaped you. Some memories remain crystal clear, others soften with time. A few may change in ways so subtle that we never notice. Yet, together, they form the remarkable story of a human life, one that continues to grow with every passing day. Science has taught us that memory is wonderfully complex. It is flexible enough to help us adapt to new experiences, yet dependable enough to guide us safely through the world. That delicate balance may be one of nature's most elegant achievements. Thank you for spending this peaceful time exploring one of psychology's most fascinating questions. There is nothing more to solve tonight, and nowhere else you need to be. You can simply allow these ideas to settle gently, much like memories themselves, becoming quieter with each passing moment. May your thoughts become calm, your breathing slow, and your night restful. Until next time, my friends, good night.